Sony just dropped Knull in the trailer for Venom 3, which makes sense. Sony spoils their movies and their trailers. So, buckle up, chaps. This video is gonna be fun. So Knull the Symbiote God is this incredibly powerful being in Marvel Comics that controls something called the Living Abyss, but he's also a kind of avatar or facsimile of the cosmic entity Oblivion. All that means is that with Oblivion itself, when everything comes to an end, the one above all dies and all that kind of stuff, that Oblivion will be the last thing remaining, right? That's been established multiple times in Marvel Comics. What's important here is that all beings that exist out there that kind of represent the absence of light and life, that's largely just an avatar of Oblivion, except for Mistress Death. And so the way things happened with Knull is that between the end of the 6th universe and the beginning of the 7th, and this kind of gap in between, Knull emerged as this being that was able to control what was called the Living Abyss, and then in turn, just kind of enjoy himself in this pure darkness. But much like walking into an empty dark house and flicking on a light switch, when the Celestials started creating light and life across the universe, it started to encroach on the darkness of Knull. So Knull himself went to war against the Celestials. Now the war wasn't very long lasting. He fashioned himself a really cool sword, killed one of the Celestials by cutting off its head, used that Celestial's cosmic energies to basically turn that sword into what we now call the all-black Necro Sword. Now the other reason why Knull went to war against the Celestials here was because given the level of power he had and his control over the Living Abyss, that the Celestials wanted him to become the new King in Black. And what that means in Marvel Comics is the Kings in Black monitor and protect the universe from the inside. Now we don't know exactly how it is that Knull's role as the King in Black would have unfolded because he rebelled against the Celestials and rejected the task they were trying to impose on him. We are seeing how things play out with regards to a King in Black right now regarding Eddie Brock, but it's basically him just in the universe and all kinds of crazy stuff happening during Venom War and so on. Playlist at the end of the video, we'll get that sorted for you. But we just don't know exactly how it would look. What's important here is that once Knull had been banished, that Knull used the all-black Necro Sword to basically re-enter into the universe and then start cutting a swath across the whole universe, killing every god he could possibly find. Now, a lot of you guys may listen to this and say, that sounds very similar to Gore the God Butcher, because it is. What ended up happening is that Knull the Symbiote God, as he was fighting all these gods across the universe, came across one that actually defeated him. And Knull's body, along with the all-black Necro Sword, fell to the planet of Gore. Gore took the sword and then did the exact same thing. It has been hinted in Marvel Comics that Gore's crusade across the universe to kill gods was actually because he was quote-unquote infected by the essence of Knull, and that's what kind of drove him to such an extreme campaign, but that's neither here nor there. What's important here is that once Knull was defeated, Knull was confined to a planet that was basically the planet of the symbiotes. Now, it was also kind of his base of operations at one point in time, so it was fitting that it became a tomb for him. But during this time, right before his defeat, as he was killing gods and so on and so forth, he started messing with the Living Abyss, right? Living darkness, and seeing what he could do with it. That led to him creating symbiotes. But ultimately, the symbiotes turned on him, and so they literally encased him in the world that he was locked in. So for those of you guys who saw the trailer and you saw where it looked like Knull was sitting on a chair surrounded by symbiotes, that may or may not be comic accurate, but by and large, he was just trapped there, just stuck there since time immemorial. The symbiotes themselves, after rebelling against the control of Knull, actually went out into the universe. And the idea is that they would basically become what were called space knights. In essence, they would bond themselves to a host, and as a kind of symbiotic relationship, they would feed off the host's energies, not enough to kill them, but enough to keep themselves alive, and they would grant the host powers. And that host would just protect the universe in varying ways based on whatever it was they felt like they needed to do. What ended up happening is that leading up to the King in Black storyline, we found out Knull was growing in power. Eventually, Knull retook control of the symbiotes, gathered them to himself, and then fought and defeated the Celestials, turning them into basically giant symbiote-encrusted avatars, right? They just did whatever he told them to do. He arrives on Earth, encases Earth in symbiote goo, nobody can escape, and that kicks off King in Black. Knull did some crazy stuff during this event. He did things like killing the Sentry, like literally like that. I mean, it was so quick. It wasn't even a contest, right? Sentry being this kind of Marvel avatar of Superman, it was a pretty crazy sight to behold. But ultimately, it all comes down to Eddie Brock. And the reason why was because Eddie Brock had been the main host for the Venom symbiote for a number of years. And his symbiote itself was still kind of its own thing, right? It understood the nature of Knull, and there was almost a kind of desire to be controlled by Knull, and Knull constantly trying to exert his influence over the symbiote. But ultimately, because of things like codices and so on and so forth, we don't have to go into that here. What ended up happening is Eddie Brock attained something called the Enigma Force. So for those of you guys who saw Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, right, the quantum realm, that's the microverse in Marvel Comics. And the microverse has a source of energy, the Enigma Force. Marvel calls it the Enigma Force because they literally never bothered to explain its origins, or how it works. But it's essentially the power of the microverse being given to a person. But it made Eddie Brock the antithesis of Knull. And so using this vast power, Eddie Brock basically destroyed Knull, then replaced him as the King in Black. And that kicks off the current run of Venom in Marvel Comics, which we've been covering, and now we're in the middle of Venom War, which is amazing. It's this phenomenal story, right? Carnage has basically become God. There's no weakness to symbiotes, right? He's like immune to fire, sonics, the whole 9 yards. He created a religion, like it's nuts, right? Venom War is so cool. Eddie Brock is basically able to resurrect himself from essentially any circumstance. The storyline is nuts. But make sure you guys check this playlist in order to get caught up on Venom War if you're interested. But Knull's cool, man. He's super powerful. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Pretty quick and dirty video on the character. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace. By the way, I didn't expect to make this video. That's why I look all disheveled this morning. I literally sat down like 10 minutes after watching the trailer and was like, well, before I get a shower, I gotta record this. So you guys better be happy. I do a lot for you guys. Peace.